A question that comes up a lot, especially on YouTube for us, is how can I find somebody that installs XPEL paint protection film and does a good job? Or, hey, who in Texas is the best? Which Texas is a huge state, so there's a bunch of them. Basically, I don't have a great answer for that. That comes down to a lot of how people do their installations, but a lot of consumers don't know what to look for. So that's what this video is going to be about. I'm going to show you what a high quality XPEL installation looks like and how you can sort of go into that conversation with a little bit more knowledge, allowing you to pick a shop that's going to do the best work for you. So one of the first things that you should probably find out from a potential shop is, do they use patterns, which are pre-cut pieces of film that are designed to fit the car, or are they using what's called a bulk installation, which is basically just a very large piece of film stretched over a panel and then hand cut out? There's advantages and disadvantages to both, and I'm going to share those with you. Number one, we use pre-cut plotter cut patterns. We have the plotter here, we order it on a roll, and that allows us to modify the patterns as well. So the reason that's important is if you're doing a bulk installation, then you have a knife on the paint for every single cut that you have to make. That can be okay if you have somebody that's really experienced, very, very good with a knife. I've seen guys that probably the best work that exists is bulk work, not the pre-cut patterns, but that's like crazy high-end stuff. If you're wrapping your Pagani Huayra or your Chiron or something like that, there's a good possibility that you're gonna use somebody that's gonna do it all by hand, and it is going to be amazing. One of my friends, Chris, he sometimes has no choice because they fly him all over the country to install film on the most exotic cars that exist on Earth, and sometimes they're one-off or only 3 of them in existence. There's no patterns for something like that. So that's not to take away from the guys that are very good at bulk installing. For most normal cars, the patterns nowadays are really, really good. And for instance, on this C8, these are some of the best patterns that exist from XPEL. You can't even really find the edge of the film. I mean, if you're really looking for it, and every single piece that you're looking at here is covered. And just so you guys understand, his camera's like a foot away from the car right now. I'm a foot away from the car right now, and I know where every line is, and I still can't really find it. Which brings me to my next point. If you are going to be looking at a shop's work, I highly recommend that over everything. Ask the shop, can I come in and watch your installation process, or at least see finished work that you have done up close and personal, because from pictures, you're not going to be able to see it. But when you get up on it, you should be able to see those edges and things like that. Now, a good shop, a good installation, you should be able to stand right where I'm standing and look at it and really not be able to tell that there's anything done to the car. So what goes into making an installation as invisible as possible? Like I mentioned, we use pre-cut patterns, and that's what I'm going to focus on for this video. But we don't just take the pre-cut pattern that exists from XPEL, and there's a lot of different companies that make patterns, by the way, so make sure that even those pre-cut patterns fit well. XPEL has a reputation for being probably the best in the industry for that, so I highly recommend using somebody that uses XPEL patterns, which usually goes along with XPEL film. But we are able to go into the software and modify every piece of film that we install on the car, and I'm going to show you exactly what that looks like. The regular pattern for this fender, off the top of my head, I want to say they don't have it wrapping down here. They definitely don't have it wrapping in the back of the door. But there's enough material on the other side to be able to wrap. So we do that. So you can see that there's no edge on the back side of either one of these front fenders, and not every car that's possible, but most of them it is. So that is an example of something that we do to modify the pattern to fit better. We also may extend edges in various places just to allow us to get better coverage, and then we can trim it back. So even if it's not necessarily somewhere that wraps, it might be somewhere where we can tuck the film underneath or something like that. Another area is the badges on the car, and if you look closely at this Corvette badge, you don't see an outline around it. Now, sometimes a customer will say, hey, I don't want you to take the badges off the car, and we do have pre-cut patterns that go around the badge. So it's not every single time we're taking them off, but we always recommend remove those badges, lay the film, and then lay the film or the badge back on top of the film. The reason that's important is because the fewer edges that you have exposed, the less likely dirt is going to build up somewhere that's going to be super obvious. So if this had a cutout here, especially if this was maybe a white car, and you don't take super awesome care of your car and it's not clean all the time, then you may start to see like a line of dirt form around there. You can clean that line, but a lot of people don't spend the time to do that, so it just sort of looks like an ugly little outline of emblems. So ask the shop if they're going to remove badges or not. Keep in mind, if they are removing badges, there are some cars that it's virtually impossible to reuse that badge. One of them that comes to mind is the dual motor performance badges, or whatever they are on Teslas. It's the thin red line, and I think it just says dual motor. They're so tiny that we really can't tape them back up and reinstall them correctly on the car. So we always recommend just ordering a new badge in that case. They're usually not that expensive, and we can have it within a day or so from the dealership. Another thing to look for is bubbles in the installation. And there's a couple of different kind of bubbles. There are moisture pockets that look like sort of just a wavy bubble on the surface of the paint. Those are probably going to dry as long as they're small, if they're present the day that you pick the car up. And then there are air pockets, and those look like tiny white bubbles. Those can be taken care of later on if they do happen to appear. A good shop will probably give it back to you with very, very few, if any, of those visible. But it is possible for a moisture pocket to sort of turn into that and then need some touch-up later. So it's not abnormal to have to revisit the car in a couple of weeks to pop a couple of bubbles, and we just use a syringe to do that. And then there's another kind of bubble, or what a consumer probably thinks is a bubble, and that is debris underneath the film. That will present itself as sort of a white little tiny bubble, and what happens is you have the surface of the car, and then pretend that my watch is a piece of dirt or debris, and the film has to go over top of that. And when it does that, it sort of tense up over, and this area around it is air. And so when that dries and the moisture dries out of there, you'll see sort of a small white dot. Some of that, believe it or not, is to be expected in a good installation. I don't think I've ever looked at an install and said, there's not a single speck of dust underneath this film. Most of you are probably familiar with installing some type of screen protector on your cell phone, or you've watched somebody do that at Verizon and probably struggle with it. That's a 3-inch flat surface. This is essentially the same concept, but this hood is 5 feet wide by 3.5 feet, and it's got all sorts of curves and things that you have to line up. So it is possible for dust in the air, or sometimes dirt in the paint will actually present itself that way, which we find on factory finished cars all the time. Or even in the film, I've seen little small specks of debris in the adhesive of the film from time to time. So don't freak out if you happen to have an installation and you find a speck of debris here and there. It's kind of normal. With that being said, there shouldn't be an abundance of it. If you have a huge cluster of dirt somewhere or something like that, just go back to your installation facility. A lot of times it's hard to see that kind of stuff as the film is drying, and I'm sure they'll be happy to take care of it if they're a reputable shop. So another thing that's very important is your alignment of your film, and that basically means how well did the installer position the film to fit the panel that it's going on. And an example of that might be right here, where we can't wrap these edges, but the bumper and the fender come together there, and we have to get a really nice tight line. Now, what you have to understand about alignment is there's a radius on the edge of every single panel, and the problem is you either have to wrap the whole way around that radius to the back side of the panel, or you need to stop just short of that radius. If you go in the middle of the radius, there's a good possibility that the film is like this, and it's holding on to that edge for dear life, and in 2 weeks from now, the film has sort of a memory. It wants to go back to that flat shape. It will pop that edge. The reason that that's a problem is now you have a sticky side of film exposed. It collects dirt and things like that, and over time it will look black just from dirt accumulating on that sticky edge. So you may see an edge that is 1/8 of an inch back off of the crease, basically, or the gap between the bumper and the fender. That's totally normal. That's acceptable. That's the way that you want it done, because it's still pretty invisible and it's not going to cause you a problem down the line. So the other thing that you sort of have to watch out for, some shops have determined that it is a great idea to disassemble the entire car to do paint protection film installations. While that may look really, really good, especially for a short period of time, right when you pick it up, you can't see any edges anywhere in the film. There's a lot of problems that we have run into with trying to disassemble. Now, we still do remove pieces here and there, but we sort of use our judgment as to how tightly they fit and things like that. Now, if you were to remove this bumper, for instance, and wrap between the bumper and the fender, the problem is those pieces fit really tightly together. And now you've added 16 mils of material, 8 mils on each side, into that groove. Number one, it's going to look like a bigger gap, which you don't want. And number two, those panels vibrate against each other as the car is going down the road. So what happens is that film vibrates and it ends up lifting or peeling. I've seen installations come back. We don't go that far, but I've seen them where somebody did and everything is lifting. Even mirrors and things like that, they bolt to the door very tightly, and that can cause areas where the film just sort of bunches up. So long-term purposes, we always make sure that we cut around things that fit too tightly. We remove things that make sense to remove. So guys, I hope that this video has helped ease your mind a little bit if you're a consumer about what to look for, what to speak to the shop about. But like I said, the most important thing is to talk to the shop. The installer is the key here. You can use any brand of film that you'd like and still get a good result, but you must have somebody that understands what they're doing. To prove that to you, we're gonna have another video coming out soon as to what it looks like when somebody that doesn't know what they're doing installs film versus a professional that does this every single day. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please make sure you do so you can catch that video of the professional versus the amateur paint protection film installer, and we will see you on the next video.